All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Correct Loser. I hope you're doing well. So, folks, today we're going to talk about Malaysian flight MH370. It's been 8 years this month since everybody woke up to the mind-bending headline that a commercial airliner was missing. Wait, what? What do you mean missing? And I have a haunting image burned in my mind from that morning. The plane was supposed to go to Beijing, and at the Beijing airport that morning on all the screens, the flight status in red letters was delayed. And the theories at the beginning were all over the place. Maybe it's in the Cambodian jungle. Maybe the Russians did it. The Russians? The Russians! Maybe it was sucked to space by space aliens. One theory I read was that there were 3 men on board that held patents to some microchips and they needed to be taken out, leaving the last person on Earth with patents to these microchips worth billions of dollars is Lord Rothschild himself. I wonder if Lord Rothschild's friends are like, bro, I'm not calling you Lord. Are you serious? Lord. Yeah, get the fuck out of here, Rothschild. But that was one, and then as more time went on, there became more of 2 camps. One camp where people thought something happened like a fire, loss of oxygen, something that caused the plane to have to turn around to go for some sort of emergency landing, and then everybody, including the pilots, fell unconscious, leaving the plane flying like a ghost ship eerily through the night until it finally ran out of fuel and crashed. And then the other big camp was that it was flown by a human until the horrible end, whether that human was a passenger or a group of passengers that took it over, classic terrorist style, or if it was murder-suicide by the pilot, which I would say, we'll talk about it, but I would say the more evidence that comes out, especially the way that the Malaysian government handled at the beginning as they dealt with the higher-ups in the Australian government, it's looking like murder-suicide by the pilot, but even that is hard to believe when you look into the guy. But let's talk about everything. I'm interested to see what you guys think. A lot of developments has happened in the past just year or two. They called off the search, but now there's like a scientist, a retired aerospace engineer that thinks he nailed it. He's betting the house on it. He's saying, I got a longitude and latitude, and if you look there, you will find it. And there's some people that are like, this is the only game in town. We got to listen to this guy. Let's look again. And then there's other people that are like, I think this guy might need a little bit more scrutiny. He's all confident. You look here, you'll find it. Well, we've spent $300 million looking all over the ocean down there, and we haven't found anything. And well, this guy's longitude and latitude is different than what has been searched. So this is really kind of stoked the fire again on this whole story, being like, open up the search again. And I think they are. At the beginning of 2023, I think they're going to look where this guy says it is. And what's so wild about it is very few mysteries of this magnitude that all the way from Lord Rothschild saving his patents, all the way to murder-suicide in a cover by the pilot and a cover-up by the Malaysian government. There's allegations by Australians that Malaysia doesn't want it found because it's going to look real embarrassing to them. It's very rare that something, a mystery with this many questions could be solved as definitively as this if they just find that little black box. Then all the answers would be answered. And that, I think, is what keeps a lot of people, myself included, really glued to this case year after year, because it's all these wild theories, and then they just find that just a little robot arm at the bottom of the ocean grabs that little black box, and we are in business and we get the answers. But let's talk about it, right? So it takes off at 12:40 a.m. from Kuala Lumpur, heads towards Beijing, going the right way, towards the South China Sea. It's the pilots say good night to air traffic control. Good night, 370. And right when they say good night, the last time they talked to air traffic control. They flip a U-turn, and somebody turns off the transponders, which makes it invisible to civilian radar. Okay, so at that point, let's just break down that little section of it. They know for a fact that U-turn was made by a person because autopilot doesn't make a turn that sharp. Okay, so as of right now, a human being is driving the plane still. I would say at this moment, that U-turn is the only time where people think there's a fire or something happened and they go, oh, we got to turn back around, and then went unconscious, and then the plane flew like a ghost ship. This is the only time, in my opinion, that could be plausible, right? They're flipping around. That would make sense. There's a fire or something. They're headed back to Malaysia for emergency landing. Well, they don't, but one more thing before I move on. Switching off the transponders really doesn't make sense, though, with that, right? That is the first sign of sinister behavior by whoever's doing it. Maybe the fire, I guess, took it out right away. There's just, oh my gosh, there's a fire on the transponder. But that's starting to look a little sinister. So it disappears to civilian radar, and they're headed back to Malaysia. Well, if there was a fire or something and they weren't passed out, they probably would have asked for emergency landing. Yeah, we got to come back. There's a fire. But they don't. They fly back over Malaysia. I mean, the terror of these poor people on the plane is unimaginable. There's nothing short about this. The fear that they felt lasted for hours and hours and hours. I mean, just imagine how long a plane takes when you're not headed to uncertainty and horrible death. I mean, the last 30 minutes of a plane already is like, come on, I'm so ready to be off. But it's really a tough thing to think about. So, but they're headed back to Malaysia. They go over Malaysia. Now, that had to be weird for the people on board going, look, there's Kuala Lumpur again. What are we doing? And now they go over Malaysia, and something, when it first came out, this detail, even though it's tough with his background and stuff, this detail made me think it was murder-suicide by the pilot. So they go back over Malaysia, and then they turn and go right by this island, which happens to be the island that the pilot grew up on. And just the way that it turns right by that island, it really does look like the pilot wanted to just see his hometown, his home island, maybe one more time. But that turn could have been made, the angle of it around the little island could have been made by autopilot, but somebody would have had to program that turn in. So at this point, if the camp that thinks that there is a horrible fire or everybody's passed out, they would have had to program the autopilot to turn. Why would they have done that? Why wouldn't they have tried to land? So at this point, in my opinion, it's looking like it was either taken over by passengers, just your classic terrorist plane takeover, or the pilot is pulling the unimaginable murder-suicide. So it goes around his home island, and then if it kept going north, it would hit many countries, many militaries, all sorts of stuff. So then it turns south again, and this is a good time to bring up. So that guy, the retired aerospace engineer that thinks he solved it, he's betting the house, he has a longitude and latitude. What he used, and it's pretty fascinating because of all of the crazy technology we have, satellites and radar and all of this stuff, the technology that may have solved this whole thing is old ham radio waves, right? So at this point, it has gone back over Malaysia, turned at the pilot's home island. There's where I grew up. Now it's turning back down. The Malaysian government, because turning the transponder off makes you invisible to civilian radar, but military radar doesn't go off those transponders. So even before this new development, the Malaysian government knew where the plane went at this point. Didn't come out right away, which is another reason people are going, do you know something? Are you hiding something, Malaysian government? Is Did you just not get organized quick enough? Are you embarrassed about that? Why did you not send up a jet or something to figure out what was going on? You let a giant commercial airliner that you had no idea what's happening with go back over your country and then do all of this stuff right next to your country. And so people think that that is suspicious of the Malaysian government. But the plot with that even thickens because the system that retired aerospace engineer that's bet in the house that has the longitude and latitude, he's using this old technology, ham radio waves. When like a ham radio is a big radio that it's like a hobby for a lot of people. They set up these big radios and then you see who you can talk to all over the world, and they can really go a long way. And whenever two of these ham radios, so if I got one and I find someone, across the globe and we hook up, that radio signal is somehow, I don't totally understand it, but it's somehow like locked in or recorded. And because there's so many of these ham radio hobbyists out there, the whole globe is wrapped in this spider web of old school radio waves. And then a guy won the Pulitzer Prize by taking all of those connections of the old school radio waves and putting it together in a program, and it's called Whisper. And the acronym is WISPR. Like I said, he won the Pulitzer Prize. And then this new guy, pretty recently, the retired aerospace engineer, used that program of all of these radio waves connected, and he figured out that when the flight 370, MH370, crossed through or went past one of these radio waves that's in this Whisper program, it disrupted it. And it disrupted it in a very clear that you could follow fashion. And so before this guy, the plot of the plane was plotted by Malaysian military, kind of came out and said, well, we did track it. Yeah, we didn't do much other than just look at it on the screen, but it did go, straight south. And then there's a little sensor on plane engines that sends off data to a satellite, like on engine performance. So they're actually able to use that to follow the thing all the way down to the South Indian Ocean. But they knew it went down there, but they didn't know precisely where. And searching just unlimited ocean is just pretty much impossible. So with this new Whisper, the retired aerospace engineer could follow it much more accurately than when the plane engines was sending off the results to that satellite. Much more. And what it found was it went back over Malaysia, went over or around the pilot's hometown island, then turned south, and then went into a 22-minute holding pattern. So it just pretty much went in like a rectangle for 22 minutes. And experienced pilots that look at that, every single one of them goes, that is a holding pattern. The angles, everything, it's a 22-minute holding pattern right there by Malaysia. And so now I know some of the higher-ups in the Australian government, some of the Australian families that lost people really want to know what was happening during that holding pattern. Were they talking to the Malaysian government? Were they negotiating with the Malaysian government? And then this is probably a good time to put out a development that was definitely left out of the initial reports. I didn't hear it until years and years later. The pilot, who was a very respected, high-up, trusted pilot with kids, a family man. It's like, why would he, is there a reason to do this? Well, he was very political. His Facebook, he was ranting and raving about politics, which I would argue has never been a sign of mental stability, ranting and raving about politics on Facebook, but a mere hours before the plane took off, before he took off the plane, his relative, who was the opposition leader for the opposition party, was convicted of sodomy. When I heard that, I was like, well, this took a bit of a turn. They didn't put that out. Malaysia didn't put that out in the initial. And then I looked into that, and that could probably be a whole episode on its own. I don't know anything about Malaysian politics, so it's hard to know whether the opposition party is corrupt, whether the main party is corrupt, whether they're both corrupt. But he was convicted of sodomy, and then I think later that charge may have been dropped, and then may have been convicted again. So maybe he was a righteous politician, and the corrupt politicians are trying to ruin him and pin a bogus sodomy charge on him. But anyway, the party that the pilot, that everybody said, no, he's a family man, there's no reason he would do it. He was, like I said, passionate about this opposition party on Facebook. And then I think it was like 5 or 6 hours before the flight took off, the conviction was official: sodomy. And so that can paint a picture that maybe wasn't around the first couple years, as this pilot, as a protest, or as you better let my relative from this bogus charge out. And so that's what they think that 22-minute holding pattern right there by Malaysia could have been about. Were they talking to the Malaysian government? And then that could also point to, according to a lot of Australians, because the plane crashed down there by Australia, I think a lot of Australians have the thought of, do the Malaysians even want to find it? Why are we the ones that are spearheading and finding answers for this thing? But who knows? It after the 22-minute holding pattern, then it goes pretty much straight south for hours and hours and hours, where it finally comes down in the South Indian Ocean, way out there in the middle of nowhere. And so, like I said, I think what's fascinating at this point is there's all these wild theories. And it's not very often when just finding the thing would answer all of them. And let me see if I have anything else about this. Totally fascinating, in my opinion. I was going to do this 2 days ago. I was working on this in the morning, and then I saw another Boeing 737 went straight nose down, which is another fascinating plane story, which is 4 years ago, right? Boeing was just getting beat by their competition, Airbus. They were just tanking. All of these major airlines wanted to buy the new plane. Come on, we need Boeing. We're going to buy Airbus. We're starting to buy the Airbuses because your new plane is out. So the higher-ups at Boeing are saying, get the new plane out. Rush it out. Make sure that there's no new training. Make sure that, that's expensive. Make sure there's no this. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. Just get the thing out. One of their test pilots went into one of the flight simulators before they released it, and had like a catastrophic incident because they put this computer program called MCAS on there, which who would have thought this was a bad idea? If a little tiny sensor that can easily be damaged gets damaged, this computer program points the nose of the plane down. I'm not an engineer or even that smart, but if I worked for Boeing, I probably would have raised my hand at that point and just been like, I don't know if the program that points the airplane nose straight down, there's nothing you can do until you just have certain death. I think we should leave that computer program out. So those planes, the new 737 MAX, were all grounded for 20 months. And this plane that went down in China, again, straight down, wasn't the 737 MAX that had that computer program. But it went straight down. I'm sure a lot of you saw the video. So I am also waiting. They'll surely find the black box for that one because it just landed in the mountains. But I mean, if that one is Boeing's fault, there's a lot of people that think the Boeing higher up should be doing jail time already. There's a Frontline documentary on that whole Boeing thing. I guess there's a Netflix one that I got to check out. But that's another story that I think is worth checking out. Hope you guys are all having a good day. I will see you soon. Why? Stiving why? Shamita.